السلام عليكم أصدقائنا المستمعين، شكرا لكم على مسيرتكم معنا في توثيقنا لأكثر من 20 سيرة في مختلف التخصصات والاهتمامات. هذه الحلقة حلقة خاصة، وهي أول مرة نصور فيها فيديو. اسمي مارك وأنا كنت ماسك فريق النشر والتسويق، ودائما أنا الشخص اللي أرد عليكم وأنزل الحلقات. عموما هالحلقة خاصة لأنه الدكتور اللي معانا دكتور مميز، اسمه الدكتور مارك ثومبسون. هو درسني في الجامعة ومتخصص في العلوم الاجتماعية والسياسية. سيرة الدكتور غريبة ومليانة يعني نقاط التحول. فمثلا الدكتور بدي حياته انه كان موظف في كروز سياحي فوق البحر، وعاش في دول كثيرة، في كوريا الجنوبية، في اليمن، في ليبيا، في فرنسا، في بريطانيا بحكم انه هو بريطاني الجنسية، وعاش في السعودية اكثر من 20 او قرابة 20 سنة، ومر يعني في فترات كثيرة من التغيرات، وعاش في مختلف أو مدن مختلفة في السعودية، وعاشر كثير من السعوديين من الطلاب، وسكن في كثير من البيوت السعودية. سيرة الدكتور مليانة بالقصص، ويمكن الشيء اللي يصب في صلب تخصص البودكاست عندنا إنه الدكتور بدأ الدكتوراه في تقريبا في عمر 40، يعني بعد مدة طويلة من حياته العملية، وما كان مخطط للشيء هذا. سيرة الدكتور مليانة بالتجارب، وإن شاء الله يكون اللقاء ثري وممتع لكم. طبعا هالحلقة بتكون باللغة الإنجليزية بحكم لغة الدكتور، ولكنها مترجمة، فاللي بيسمعنا الآن وحاب إنه يشوف الترجمة هيلاقي رابط اليوتيوب في وصف الحلقة، بحيث إنه يقدر يشوفها مترجمة. ما بدي أطول عليكم في المقدمة، أترككم مع اللقاء وإن شاء الله أنكم تستمتعوا. السلام عليكم. How are you, Dr. Mark?
Fine.
It's nice to see you outside the university. First of all, let me thank you for this opportunity, and inshallah it will not be that hard for you. The questions and also the time, inshallah it will not be that long.
Thank you for the invitation.
You too. Okay. First of all, we want to start with your personal card, where you were born, and how was your childhood in Italy, in France, and US. Can you move us through that a bit?
Well, firstly, my father worked for the Standard and Chartered Bank, which I'm sure a lot of young Saudis will know because it sponsors Liverpool. Yes, and that's what you see on the T-shirts. So when I was at KFUPM, it used to make me laugh because I used to see all these students walking around wearing T-shirts wearing my father's company on it, you know. So he worked for the Standard Chartered Bank, which is a big international bank, and is actually a very old British bank, if you like, one of the sort of old empire banks. So sort of situated all around the world. And because of that, I spent all my childhood living overseas. So I actually left the UK when I was a year old. In 1962, and we went to live in New York for several years, and for that reason I actually I found a file once which my parents had kept from November 1963, which has all the original newspapers of the Kennedy assassination. So I've still got that actually. So we lived in I sort of grew up as a very young child in New York, although obviously my memories are sort of, you know, I have memories, but nothing sort of particularly huge. And then we moved back from the United States to Europe, briefly to the UK, but then we moved to Italy, where I lived until I was about 13 years old. So we were based primarily in Milan, but my father was actually in charge of Italy, Switzerland, and what was then Yugoslavia, which of course no longer exists today. It's Serbia and Croatia and Montenegro, etc. So I grew up in this part of the world, and I went to an international school in Milan, although we spent a lot of time in Rome as well, and we spent a lot of time in Yugoslavia and Switzerland. So yes.
Perfect. Okay, back to the London. Do you remember anything special in London that time? You know, it's a very old time for us. But do you remember anything special from that days in London?
Not particularly, because I wasn't really there for very long. I mean, the only thing I suppose the sort of the thing that I remembered as most special from that time is my father coming home with a new television and turning it on turning it on, and we were all amazed because it was color.
Wow.
So yeah, but then we sort of, and we sort of moved to Italy sort of fairly soon after that. So sort of most of my memories are from early memories from the USA, and then obviously a lot from Italy.
Yeah. As you know, usually in childhood, it's very hard to make a friendship. And how was your child or your kid time moving from country to country? What's the challenging making friends? As you know now, even if we change our place, we still can connect with people through social media and so on. But that time, there's nothing you can connect. How was that for you?
I didn't have any problems with it, but I think that's probably because I went to a lot of international schools with other children who were in similar situations to the one I was in. So in other words, their parents were either in finance or commerce or government, the diplomatic service. So I went to school with children from all over the world and all nationalities, who were also used to moving around. And so for us, it was just normal, if you like, because we didn't really know any different. But I think some people sort of assume that it would be disruptive or it would be sort of difficult, but children are very flexible. Children make friends quite easily. And I think it's just when you don't actually know any different, when it's sort of part of your life, it didn't really matter. But for me, it was fantastic because I love history. So we would have history classes about the Romans and things like this. And then, at the weekend, actually go there and see it all.
Yes,
and we'd go skiing at the weekend and things like this, that was just my life. It was just the normal childhood. So even though I changed schools very regularly, it didn't make a great difference to me.
Yeah, I see. So what is the main reason that you keep moving from countries? Is it because your father work or?
Yes, because he was assigned. He used to set up new branches of the bank. So he was assigned to various countries to set these up. And actually, although we were based in, for example, we were based in Milan for many years, he wasn't working only in Milan. He was actually spending a lot of time working in Africa, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, South Africa, and what have you. When my parents, I had one brother, when my parents could take us with them, they did. So I traveled extensively as a child to many different places, but we didn't go everywhere with my parents because we couldn't, because it would have been too disruptive for our education. And also because there were some places where my parents made conscious decisions not to take us because we were very impressionable, obviously, as children. So one of the places we didn't go to was South Africa because both my parents were very against any type of racism, and they grew up in the Second World War, so they saw it themselves. My father was in Berlin in 1945 because my grandfather was part of the British government in 1945. So my father saw all of this firsthand. So he didn't want to expose us to the apartheid regime of South Africa at that sort of age. So there are some places we didn't go.
I see. So, when you back with the memory, can you tell us about how was the lifestyle overseas? Sometimes when you after you do things a lot, it become like boring for you. So did you feel any difference nowadays you are in Saudi Arabia and you are working not overseas? So do you miss that lifestyle, or it's just
no? I don't miss that lifestyle now because it's not my life now. And I think different stages of your life, you have different types of experiences and different ways of living, and what suits you at one stage of your life doesn't necessarily suit you at another stage of your life. And so I, when I was younger, that was my life. I didn't really know any different, but I wouldn't necessarily want to live like that now. But at that stage,
it was fine.
It was fine.
It was
It was exciting.
Yeah.
I mean, I look back on it with great affection, and also I realized how much I learnt at a very young age. I mean, as I said before, I went to school with children of all nationalities.
Huge diversity.
Huge diversity,
Yes.
and you know, that exposed me to lots of different people, lots of different cultures, from a very, very young age, which can only be, I think, personally, I think benefited me enormously.
Absolutely. And I think this make it easier for you to move around
Yes.
cities during your career.
Well, yes, but also it's the only way of life I've ever known.
Oh, okay.
I've never really known anything
Mhm.
different. I've lived almost my entire life overseas. To me, it's just normal.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like I started when I was 21 or something. That's how I grew up. So I don't really, it's just a normal way of living for me in many ways. And it might seem strange to a lot of other people, but when that's been your whole life from before you can remember, then it's just, yes,
It's
just how it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So after your childhood, actually, what did you study in your BS? What was your major?
I went back to England for all of my university education. So my bachelor's, both my master's and my PhDs, excuse me, I did in England, and I went back to England to do those. So I spent quite a, you know, the sort of significant amounts of my time that I've spent in the UK have been when I was at university. Yes. So I went and did, strangely enough as it might sound, I went and did a textiles related course in Manchester when I was 17. I think I went to university, which frankly was too young. And I did the wrong course because I found out I didn't enjoy it. But I did it, and I got my BA. Although when I left university in 1982, I at that point thought I would never go back to university because I didn't enjoy my university BA.
Even though you continue to PhD.
Well, but no, that was different. That's what I'm saying. I mean,
We'll come back to that.
I didn't realize then that this would happen, you know. But I think like sometimes many of us actually realize when we look back on our lives that actually the BAs that we did when we were very young were not necessarily what we particularly wanted to do and what we were not interested in, and had absolutely nothing to do with anything that I've ever done in the rest of my life.
Yeah, I think this is a very good point. Actually, a lot of people confused, and they sometimes disappear. Have a depression when they choose the wrong major, especially in PS. But when you think when you think about it in your age now, you can easily shift after that. So it's fine.
Yes, exactly. Now I know that. So it's, you know, so it wasn't something, I mean, it wasn't, I didn't find it very interesting, and it wasn't a particularly important sort of stage of my life. And I graduated in 1982.
Yeah. Wow, mashallah. So because it's quite strange that you didn't like university, yet your career was teaching, or you.
Yes, but I think that was because I was doing the wrong course. I mean, I don't think it had anything really to do, and it was also a very badly taught course. So I actually learned a lot about how not to teach from that course, which I sort of remember, which I sort of took forward with me subconsciously, I think, into later years. Yes.
Okay. Interesting. So and you teach English in Turkey, and also
but before I did that, I mean, I think after I left university in 1982, I embarked on what was probably one of the most important parts of my life.
Okay.
Which was when I went to sea and I worked on ships.
Like in cruise.
Yes, on cruise ships. So until I was 30 years old. Yes. And all of that went back to the fact that when we lived in New York, we used to travel on the great ships between Europe and the United States, the most famous of which is the Queen Mary, which is now a museum in Long Beach, California.
Yes.
Some people might have visited. Well, I actually traveled on that when I was very, very young. and the Queen Elizabeth and the France, the United States, the last of the great liners. And I always sort of remembered that, and I always loved it as a boy, and I was always asking my parents about it. And so my dream was not to go to university. My dream was to go to sea.
Okay.
So I went to university because my parents wanted me to go. And when I finished, I sort of said, right, alas, I've done that now. Can I go? And they were like, yes, off you go. So that's when I went to sea. And I traveled all over the world. And again, I worked on 9 different ships with people from all over the world, all different types of backgrounds, all different types of nationalities. You have to work as a team because that's a ship. I saw places I think that most people would only ever dream of seeing, and that was part of my daily life. And I did that until, as I say, until I was 30, and it certainly had a profound impact on my life, and was an incredibly happy period for me when I look back on
So
it.
it seems that you missed seas after you you go to
No,
university.
I don't. Yeah, I did. Yes, I mean, I think it's a young person's job. I wouldn't particularly want to do it now. But when I was in my 20s, it was perfect. And as I say, we went all over the world. And
Actually, it's very interesting career. This kind of career, it's very little people in the world doing this, and I think it's for us, it's like unknown place. So
yeah,
how they are communicate, especially in that days, how you see the news and so on. It's like a new world. You are just
yes,
isolated from all the world.
well, in a way. But I mean, we obviously traveled to so many different countries, and I learned so much about a lot of different countries because of going there, and that gave me sort of an appetite to revisit later in my life.
Is there something special happening that days? I mean, did you remember something, an accident maybe, or
There were lots of things that happened. I mean, too many to really sort of talk about. So, I mean, we could write a book about it, really. But I think
you have to
the
be
most
there.
profound, the most important thing that happened to me, and obviously which had quite a big impact on my subsequent career, was that in June 1989, we were actually in China. So we were in China and I was actually in Beijing during the Tiananmen Square massacre on June the 4th, 1989, when all the students were massacred, the Chinese Spring, if you like, and China's course took a very different direction since Tiananmen. And of course, we're living with the consequences of that today. So we were very aware, even at that time, just how profound this was. And of course, subsequently teaching politics and things like this to sort of look back on those and to sort of realize that, I was actually there when these things happened. I saw these things happened. I mean, I think these have a big impact on your life.
Absolutely.
And I was very fortunate, and going back to what I was saying before, I was very fortunate that my parents encouraged me to travel and encouraged me to do these types of things because we traveled so much when we were young, and it was part of our life. But and they encouraged me to learn as well, from not just to go to places, but also to read, to find out, to learn. And in fact, when I turned 21, my present from my parents was my first trip to the then Soviet Union.
Wow.
So all my friends went on beach holidays to Spain, and I went to Moscow and Leningrad, and everybody was like, why? But it was fantastic. So no, but these experiences, like being in China in 1989, had going to the Soviet Union several times actually before it disappeared. Had and my father being in charge of Yugoslavia during the Cold War, for example, and traveling to all of these places that their political systems now no longer exist. It's all history. That obviously did have a very profound impact on me and what I did later in my life.
Absolutely. So after working in the seas, you shift your career to teaching
Yes,
English?
I mean, as I said before, I mean, working on the ships was a young person's job, I think,
Yes.
and as we say in English, it sort of has a shelf life. I mean, you get to a point where you realise that maybe this is not, this is fantastic, but you don't necessarily want to do this forever. And I think it's sort of the old sort of saying in English about, always leave the party early.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd spent 2 years on a ship in Australia and had the time of my life, probably the best 2 years ever of my life in terms of the people I met, the places I went to. 2 years in the South Pacific, scuba diving all over the South Pacific, and going, regularly to places like Fiji and Tonga and New Caledonia and Papua New Guinea, and this was just all part of. So I think myself and my friends, we sort of all were realizing that actually we wanted to move on and do other things. Life was sort of telling us that it was now time
So
to move on.
it was your choice.
Yes.
I mean, it's not the offer that come to you and you
No,
decide
it was my choice to
to,
decide. I decided that this had been amazing and fantastic, but now
but leave it just
it was now, and leave it on a high as well.
Yes.
Leave it. But my mother was a teacher for
Mhm.
many years, and I'd always thought about teaching. I don't know why, but I'd always sort of had something. I thought about teaching. So I left the ships. I went and did a teacher training course in English, and then I moved to Ankara in Turkey for my first teaching job. Where I was there during the first Gulf War, so 91. Yes,
91.
1991. Yes, so the first Gulf War, and and then I realised that this was something that I enjoyed doing, and it was a fantastic school. I had a wonderful director of studies who was very much a mentor. She just said that she felt that I should go and do some sort of further study and go into this deeper. And so I went and did my first master's in linguistics at the University of Wales, and which I thoroughly enjoyed because I was doing applied linguistics and phonetics and sort of methodology and all of these sorts of things, and it was a great course, and I got a lot out of it. And when just before I was due to finish at the university, I was in my supervisor's office, and he had a phone call from a colleague of his saying, I know this sounds very strange, this colleague, he said, but we're looking for somebody with a particular set of skills, and we don't know if you maybe know anybody. And he said, we're looking for somebody who's just recently got a master's in applied linguistics, but also somebody who might have some sort of maritime experience.
Interesting.
And my supervisor says, you never believe this, but he's actually sitting opposite me.
Wow.
And so that led me to my first job in South Korea, which was teaching at Korea Maritime University, which was the maritime university for the Korean merchant navy. So I went out to Busan in South Korea at a very interesting time, because it was when South Korea was transitioning from a military dictatorship to democracy. So that's when I arrived. So that was also very interesting. So, and I was then in South Korea for about 5 years.
Oh, from 1992
to 97.
97, and then
and I moved to Seoul for the last 2 years because I wanted the experience, and I worked for Sejong University in Seoul, and I spent 5 years in Korea. It was a very interesting time, because politically it was a very interesting time, and then I moved after that. Strangely enough, I had another offer from a maritime institution, and I went to work for the Royal Thai Navy Academy. So actually my maritime career didn't stop when I left the ships. It went on to 1999. So I worked for the Royal Thai Navy, but that was very difficult because that was at the time of the East Asian economic crash. And so the budgets was slashed for the Navy and everybody, and I was having to work sort of part-time jobs and weekend just to sort of just to sort of keep my head above water. And it got to a point where it just didn't seem like it was worth it. And when I was young, and when we were traveling around, we used to come to the Middle East, and we used to go to Jordan and Egypt. And my father also used to do a lot of work in Turkey. So this was a sort of region that I knew from my youth, and it was somewhere I'd always wanted to go back to. And so I went, first of all, to work for a teacher training college in Oman, in Nizwa, which in those days was very, very small.
Okay.
Yes.
See, I didn't know that place.
Yes, it's much bigger now. There's a university there and various things, but in those days it was very small. And I was supposed to be, it was a teacher training college for young men, young Omanis who were going into the Omani education system to teach primary school children. So I went there supposedly to teach English, but the first day I was there, they sort of said, actually, we'd much rather you teach physics to them. So I didn't know anything about physics, so I went and found a book and I taught them physics. So there's a whole generation of Omani primary school teachers teaching the completely wrong type of physics to these Omani kids, because I didn't know the first thing about physics.
Oh, okay. It's quite strange. They can't find someone who can.
I don't know, but this is a long time ago.
Yeah,
this is a long time ago.
So after Oman, you went to Kuwait, and then
briefly to Kuwait, but the main I went to Kuwait because I was just waiting for a visa. But I mean, I came here basically.
You didn't work for Kuwait
just for a month.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you came.
I came here. Yes.
Yeah. 2001.
January, literally the first week of January 2001.
Wow.
I first came to Saudi Arabia. In
Jeddah. You were in Jeddah.
Yeah. Yes.
And that time you came to work as a teacher also, or not?
Yeah, as a teacher for Saudi Arabian Airlines.
Saudi Arabian Airlines. Yes. Interesting. So how was that experience working?
It was a fantastic experience. I mean, the reason I came to Saudi Arabia was that some of the people I worked with in Oman had worked here, and they were always saying to me, never go to Saudi Arabia. Oh, don't go to Saudi Arabia. You won't like it, blah, 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 and everything. So I decided to come.
Oh, okay.
Because I like to make my own mind up, I like everybody else in the world and in the West, and especially in those days, I mean, I really didn't know anything about Saudi Arabia at all, other than the sort of stereotypes and generalizations that you get in the media. And it's funny actually, because when I was traveling a lot when I was younger, people used to ask me about where did I want to go? Where did I, was there anywhere I didn't want to go? And I always used to say in those days that the two countries I had no interest in visiting were Australia and Saudi Arabia. And those are the two countries that I arrived at and fell in love with the instant I arrived.
Okay.
So it just shows you how wrong you can be, doesn't it? But when I arrived in Jeddah, they asked me to, they were conducting some examinations for the airline all over Saudi Arabia. And they asked me if I'd be willing to travel to administer these examinations, and if I would be willing to sort of just go at a moment's notice and stay in different places. And of course I said, yes, I'd love to. I had the opportunities, therefore, in the first few months of being in Saudi Arabia to really travel all over the kingdom, whether it was Guriyat in the north or Shadura in the south. Yes, everywhere. And it was an amazing experience because it made me realize, how little I knew about Saudi Arabia. And it opened my eyes, I think because of that, it's directly because of that experience that I am sitting here now. That, absolutely, it's because of that. Yes, if I just stayed maybe in Jeddah or just stayed at the Saudi Arabian Airlines compound or something, maybe it wouldn't have been quite the same. Although I'm sure I would have still traveled, but that really, as I say, that really opened my eyes.
It's different. Also, that time you travel to discover and to observe more and more. So it was with the different.
It was my first time to Qasim. It was my first time to all over the Najran. First time to Abha, first time to Khamis Bouchet. all over the
2000
kingdom. Yanbu, all over the kingdom. And of course, yes, in 2000 it was very different than
Yes,
it is
absolutely.
now. Very, very different
Yeah.
than it
I,
is
th- I
now.
think the
I mean, there
file,
were similarities, but still it was
Absolutely.
very different.
I think the file of Saudi Arabia is so big because you spend a lot of time here.
Mm.
Before we go through that file, let's
Mm.
let's back a little bit to Yemen and Libya.
Oh yes,
Can
right.
you
Yes.
just tell us something about your work there, your period in Yemen and Libya? Let's start with Yemen first of all.
Yemen, I was only for about 6 months in Aden, and I was running a school there. And I was also learning Arabic when I was there, but I was running a school there. But I had to leave because it was the Gulf War, and things got a bit,
Unsafe.
Yes,
Yeah.
and then I was like the only Western, I think, in the whole area or something. But it was a lovely, it was a great experience, and I had made great friends, and I certainly loved living there. It was fascinating to live in some, Yemen. Yemen was just amazing, fascinating place, and somewhere I would hopefully at some point in the future like to go back to. Libya was different because it was an interesting contract that I was asked to go. It was actually working at an oil company in Ras Lanuf, which is between Tripoli and Benghazi, and we used to go for 10 weeks, work for 10 weeks, and then have, I think it was 4 or 5 weeks vacation, because there's nothing there. It's in the middle of nowhere, so even if you had time off, there wasn't anything to do. But that was again a very interesting experience because it was in the Gaddafi era, so to sort of see that, I never thought I would see Ras Lanuf again after I left, but then I subsequently saw it on the TV, constantly when the problems in Libya started, because the road that goes past Ras Lanuf is where they were fighting. But it was a great experience, and lovely people. It was a very positive experience, but I had to leave because unfortunately my parents both became ill, and that's why I had to go back home to France. Yes.
To France, yeah. Okay. And that was at the end of the last century, 19.
No, that was 2005.
2005. Oh, so you went.
Yes,
to
I
Jeddah?
briefly left. Yes, sorry,
You left
I
Jeddah.
briefly left Saudi Arabia for a couple of years, and that's when I was in Libya. But that's because when after 9/11, I was obviously in Jeddah when 9/11 happened, and then there was like a couple of years where things were quite difficult. Yes, so I was in Libya, and then I came back here.
Okay, yeah, I see. So after you go to Libya, you back to France.
Yes, and then
stay with your.
Yes, that's right. Then I did my master's.
Your second master.
My second master's, and then I came, which was in Middle East policy studies.
Why did you choose this topic exactly?
Because ever since living in Oman and then in Saudi Arabia, and then obviously being here with 9/11, and then seeing the sort of the reaction to 9/11, I became more and more interested in this region, and I was reading a lot about the region, and I certainly saw a lot of the misconceptions, the outright lies, the way truths are distorted. I suppose today we would call that fake news, wouldn't we? But in those days we didn't have that term because Donald Trump was still a businessman then. But no, I became more and more interested. So I decided that it might be, I had to look after my father for a little while after my mother died. So I needed to be near him. So I decided to go back to university, and that's when I went to the Institute of Arab and Islamic Studies, Mahad Darasat al-Arabiya wa Islamiyya at Exeter University, which is very famous for Arab studies. And in fact, the Director General of King Faisal Center, where I'm sitting now, that's how I know him, because we studied there together.
You studied there together.
And
okay.
the gentleman next door, Dr. Fahad, also studied with me there.
Okay.
And my boss at Jamiat Malik Fahad, he also studied there.
So we can...
and it's one of those, and it's very well known in the region. So I did a Middle East policy studies.
But it wasn't in your plan. I mean,
not originally. No,
originally,
it was
yeah.
those circumstances. And then whilst I was doing that, I didn't know. Obviously, I went into it sort of thinking, "Oh, you know, is this going to work out or not?" And lots of people thought I was crazy going back to university at what they said, you know, your age. But and it was difficult to start with because I was studying mainly with lots of students who had recently finished their BAs in Middle East studies. So they sort of had knowledge of the literature and were used to it, whereas I went in sort of cold, as it were. So for the first 3 months was very difficult because I had to sort of catch up.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then I realized, you know, when I did catch up, and, you know, I sort of had a realization that this was something that actually I really enjoyed. And actually, you know, something that I'm quite good at, you know, which was quite a surprise. I never sort of thought about that anything like that would happen. So my life sort of totally changed. And my supervisor, my master's supervisor, sort of said to me, you know, he recommended that I do a PhD, but I wasn't sure. And my master's dissertation was all about Saudi Arabia, but I wasn't sure about doing a PhD, and I wanted to think about it. So I said, well, you know, I'm going to go back to Saudi Arabia, and I'm going to think about whether or not I want to do this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, do I want to dedicate 100% of my time to Saudi Arabia, basically? And if I am going to do that, then, you know, what am I going to sort of look at? So I came back here, and I was working for the National Guard, and during that time, you know, I thought very deeply about it, and, you know, the answers I came up with were yes, I very much wanted to do it.
And that was 2007,
six,
yeah.
7, something like
Yeah.
that. Yes.
So you did your PhD while you are working here in
Well, I
Saudi?
did. Yes, I did. I went back to the UK and did one academic year, which of course is a lot less than a year. It's
Yes.
actually from October to May or something,
Mm.
April or whatever it was. And I did all my sort of conceptual framework and sort of theory and everything that year. And then I came straight back, and I did all my research for my PhD here, and then I went back to the UK for about 3 months when I wrote up my thesis, and then I came straight back after that.
Mm.
Yeah, so during my PhD, most of the time I was here because I was actually doing field work here, and I didn't need to be at university.
Field work with which company?
Well, no, the field work for my research.
For
so
your
all
research.
the interviews.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And what was your thesis title?
The title of my thesis was the title of that one of those books there, just on the table,
okay.
which was Saudi Arabia and the Path to Political Change, National Dialogue and Civil Society.
This one, huh?
This one here. So I actually had a book contract offered to me before I finished my PhD.
Mm-hmm.
So my PhD thesis was turned into that book. Yes, obviously, you know, I had to do the thesis and then pass the thesis, and then, you know, transform the thesis into a book, because they're two separate things. But I did lots of interviews, about 120 interviews, with a whole variety of Saudi people about that book, and that's really, you know, that's what I spent. That's what I was doing whilst I was here. But I mean, I was at the National Guard, and then I changed when I was finishing this off. I changed jobs and I moved to Prince Sultan University, Jamiat Emir Sultan. But both the National Guard and Jamiat Emir Sultan, I mean, I told them before I went there that, you know, I'm also doing this research. I'm also writing this PhD book, what have you, and to be completely upfront with them so that they knew, and so if there were any issues with that or any problems.
Yeah, but that time.
But they weren't. You know, it was fine.
And that time you decide, or you feel that you will dedicate your time to Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
You enjoy your time.
Yes.
Here,
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, doing my PhD was one of the most enjoyable things I've ever done. It was, I mean, because a PhD is a project. That's all it is.
Absolutely.
You know, and I thoroughly enjoyed doing it, and the people I met, the people I interviewed, I learned so much. It was a very incredibly rewarding experience, and I think it's like anything you do when you go into things quite deep. You suddenly realize that you actually know very little, and you have to keep going and keep going. But of course, this was, from the time I sort of started sort of focusing exclusively on Saudi Arabia, and not Saudi. When I say focusing exclusively on Saudi Arabia, I mean focusing exclusively on really sort of domestic socioeconomic and socio-political issues in Saudi Arabia. I don't look at sort of foreign policy and things like that, because there's lots of other people that do that.
Absolutely.
I had decided that this was my focus, that this is what I wanted to do, and this is what I'm still doing today. So right from sort of my master's dissertation through to now, there's been very much a sort of narrative of what my research, what my interest is. It sort of followed it's sort of all built on each other, as it were. And that's because that's really, the more I did it, the more I realized that I enjoy it, the more I realize it's what really interests me. But of course, it also aligned with what was happening in Saudi Arabia from that point to this point, with this sort of enormous transition, these huge sort of socioeconomic changes that we've seen over the last 15 years.
Yes.
So that book sort of starts at around 2003 to about 2010, and so that's really, I've covered Saudi Arabia through this sort of enormous transition, these enormous changes. So it's been a, incredibly opportune time to sort of be here and be able to do the research on the ground in Saudi Arabia, whilst and witness all of this.
And actually, it was an interesting period, because after 9/11 and then 2003, the Iraqi-American war, and also the financial crisis, 2008.
No, I mean, there's so many things have happened in this period, and the kingdom has gone through such huge changes, such huge transitions in so many ways.
Absolutely. And after that, you went to KFUPM.
Yes, so I had already spoken to KFUPM whilst I was doing my PhD, and KFUPM, the Department of General Studies, as it was then, had expressed an interest, in me going there. And I went to KFUPM to meet everybody. And when I was actually here at King Faisal Centre, because I came here as a visiting researcher, so I've been affiliated with King Faisal Centre now for about 10 years, and in one way or in another. And so it was actually whilst I was here in January 2011, wasn't it? Yes, because it was the Arab Spring. So I was actually here that I actually went to meet everybody at King Fahd, KFUPM.
KFUPM,
yes. And that was when it was sort of decided, if you like, that I would go there. Yes.
And when we are speaking about KFUPM, always the students of KFUPM, they are saying we are the hardest university in the region. Sometimes they saying in the world.
Well,
so, what do you think about this?
Well, no, I mean, KFUPM is obviously got a fantastic academic reputation. It's got a very well established reputation.
This is a political answer.
No, it has. No, it's not, because if you look at the university rankings, global university rankings, it's all there. KFUPM is very highly ranked. It's very prestigious, and it's a very good university, and obviously the quality of the students is exceptional. So and it does. I mean, KFUPM pushes the students and challenges the students, but Absolutely. That's a distinct advantage of going to KFUPM, and it's also an advantage of teaching at KFUPM.
So I study in KFUPM, and I had the globalization with you, and I can say, and people or students sometimes says that you are one of the best professors there. Do you have some techniques, or are you? What's the secret? Let's say about.
Well, I mean,
because you do like teaching.
Yes, I love teaching.
You in the previous time you don't like teaching, but
no, I've always loved teaching. I've always loved teaching, but obviously, I mean, I taught for 30 years, and and although I'm not teaching full time at the moment, I don't consider that my teaching career is over. It's just that my life moved on, as it were. But no, I mean, I was teaching. I was allowed to teach political science courses at KFUPM at the beginning of an incredibly interesting period in Saudi Arabia, with students who were thirsty for knowledge and really wanted to sort of have an understanding of the world around them. So for me, teaching at KFUPM was incredibly rewarding, but it was also very easy because I had every single semester for the entire time I taught at KFUPM, I had large groups of students, but all of them wanted to be there. Now, most teachers will tell you that almost never happens. So that was, it was a very, I can say this honestly, and I've said this to many people over the years, but it's the absolute honest truth that in the 8 years or nearly 8 years I was at KFUPM, I never once thought before I went to class, oh, I've got to go and teach. I never once thought that.
Wow.
Which is extraordinary, because I certainly thought that before in other places I taught, but I never thought that at KFUPM. But that was because the students were so engaged, and of course, I learned so much as well from the students, and from the projects that they did, and class discussions, and those video conferencing classes we used to do with other institutions. And I learned enormous amounts about the kingdom from the classes. And of course, the relationships I formed with students at KFUPM continue to today. And I have, I have former students all over the kingdom, working in all sorts of different institutions. And I keep up with a great many of them, which of course is very rewarding and also very interesting, and not just in terms of seeing how they develop as individuals and how they grow, but also for my network, as it were, for my research network, the fact that I have former students working in all sorts of places is incredibly useful. So I mean, my time at KFUPM was a very, very rewarding, very happy time. And in terms of, I think when you're an experienced teacher, you pick up lots of things over the years, and you can obviously, you should be able to sort of use that in class. And I think, as I said earlier on, I remember the teachers that I liked, and the teachers or instructors or professors or whoever that I learned from, and why did I learn from them. And I also remember those who I didn't like and I didn't learn
and
from.
You are trying to
so you try and you try and think of, okay, so I loved that professor because therefore there are obviously reasons for that, and so you try and bring that to sort of your own teaching as well. But I think the topic was very interesting, the environment was good, the context that we were in as well was conducive to this. Yes.
Interesting. Actually, from the beginning until now, all the things that we are talking about was in the past memory. But you just highlight the topic that you make a lot of friends from the students, and you have your former students all over the world. And I think last weekend you were to Qasim, and this is it's still fresh in your memory. Can you just talk about a little bit about Qasim? Just we want to refresh the interview.
Yes, I love.
I think, sorry, I think you love Qasim.
I do.
Yeah, you love
very
Qasim.
much. Well, I find Saudi Arabia, it's fascinating. Saudi Arabia is such an interesting country. I think so many people are unaware of the diversity in Saudi Arabia, whether that's geographic diversity, whether that's diversity of different types of people, cultural, different types of constituencies. So I think traveling around the kingdom is really interesting, because you learn so much about what is a huge country after all, and a very beautiful country, stunningly beautiful. I do like Qasim. I find it incredibly interesting part of the country, and of course, again, it's very beautiful, and it's very it's very different as well from being in the cities, from being in Riyadh or being in Jeddah or being in sort of Khobar Daran, as it were. Seeing different types of life, if you like, seeing a different type of Saudi Arabia. And certainly I usually stay in Al Mithnab rather than, at the big, not an Breda. Yeah, I stay, which is, of course, is much more sort of rural. But that in itself is fascinating because, as I say, you experience a different pace of life, different type of life, and actually, and of course, all of that in itself is sort of contributes to my research. Be physically able to sort of go and visit people and talk to people and sit in the majlis, sit in the istiraha, what have you, and have these conversations and go out to the desert or whatever it is. It's a learning experience, and I'm able to therefore, I think, bring a certain amount of authenticity to what I write.
Talking to Qasim, it's like a likable place. They think they have special things. I mean,
yes,
each and every place in Saudi Arabia.
Yes, exactly, and you need to go, and therefore, you need to. I think as a researcher, I go because I love going and I'm interested in going, but also as a researcher, it's just so valuable to see, to experience, have these different experiences in different parts of the country with different types of people. It's invaluable.
Interesting. Okay, and after you work in KFUPM, you work for 9 years or
7 and a half years.
Yes. And then you moved here to King Faisal Center.
Yes.
For research, yeah.
Yes.
And why did you?
Well, because I said to you, I've been associated with the center for around 10 years, and I've done a lot of research with the center, and I've attended lots of center events. I've spoken for the center at conferences or workshops and things like this. I have a lot of colleagues here who I've known many years, and it felt like the right time and the right thing to do in terms of my career, in terms of my research and my projects that I'm working on at the moment. It just felt right, and it wasn't that I had grown tired of the teaching or anything, because I hadn't. But I think after 30 years, I had grown tired of majors and exams and marking and everything. And I think I got to a point where it was like, I've been teaching for 30 years. Maybe now it's sort of time to have a change of focus. And I think we all need to do that sometimes.
Absolutely.
I think it's important to shake things up a bit, to sort of get out of your comfort zone and do something different. And as I say, it just seemed to fit. I should have come earlier in the year, of course, but of course coronavirus is sort of through this year, through a sort of spanner in the works. But although I have been working for the centre online, as we all were until fairly recently, but it just seemed, and it wasn't as though it wasn't like a completely new job for me, because I know everybody here. We're all colleagues and friends, and
you have a lot of wasta.
And I've been connected to the centre anyway, and I've published quite a. I'm sure people know I've published quite a lot with the centre, commentaries and special reports. So, for example, the year that MISC Global Forum focused on skills, I also published a special report about what the skills that young Saudis need, and so I was always connected to the centre, strongly connected to the centre. So it was just a sort of progression, if you like.
Yeah, I see. So mainly what you are doing here in centre, research?
Yes. I mean, I've set up a new unit here, which is the socioeconomics unit. So so obviously that's very new. I've been doing a lot of research. So I published something just recently with the centre about the ramifications of the coronavirus on education and the shift to online education, because this is obviously very important. I published a paper recently on sort of the ramifications of the pandemic on sort of the socioeconomic future of young Saudis. I'm working with another researcher on a big project about sort of regional attitudes to employment. Yes, it's mainly research, and we have a webinar tomorrow about sustainability. So, and it's mainly research and presentations and writing and all of the, and it's what I was doing before. So it's just sort of progressing. So
and more focus.
Yes, more focused. Yes, and as I say, I felt that I was ready for that.
You are living in Saudi Arabia in very important and sensitive, and it's not sensitive, but it's very important time. You see a lot of changes. Can you again tell us about your point of view about all these changes, and what did you recognize as a researcher, and what did you observe about this society?
I think people talk about Saudi Arabia going through enormous changes in the last couple of years, but I think we have to remember that Saudi Arabia has actually gone through enormous changes since the 1970s. And if you think of the world that your parents and your grandparents were born into, which is a totally different world. So those changes are not just recent. Those changes have been going on for decades. And for example, if I give a lecture in the UK, I always tell the audience that, Saudi Arabia went from Queen Elizabeth I to Queen Elizabeth II in 40 years. It took us 400. So your change was incredibly rapid in an incredibly short period of time. And you can build infrastructure and hospitals and universities and all of these types of things quite quickly. But you can't. But mentalities take longer to change,
Yes.
And so what we've seen happen, of course, is society accepting some of these changes, not accepting other things. I mean, I think this is a normal process when you go through a very rapid period of change. I do think it's very important that Saudi Arabia keeps its authenticity, if you like, that Saudi Arabia remains Saudi Arabia, or the different types of Saudi Arabia. I think that's very important because those are your identity narratives. That's what makes you who you are. So I gave a talk on Saudi National Day actually this year, although I gave it from London because I wasn't able to come back because Saudi Arabia was still closed at that point because of the virus. And I said something which seemed to resonate with a lot of the audience and the other Saudi speakers. And I said, everybody's always talking about change, but actually I think what's more important is not change. I think what's important is to adapt, because you need, you can adapt, but at the same time, you need to retain what's important for you, for your country, for your society, for your community, for your family, for you as an individual as well. And I remember when I taught the globalization course at KFUPM, I used to say to the students a lot that this was an opportunity for them to sort of stand back and sort of look at the impact of globalization on Saudi Arabia from a sort of more objective point of view, but also very important because forget exams and majors and all of that type of thing. And you have to do those because of your university. But actually, this was an opportunity to sort of consider everything that's going on and to think about how you want the kingdom to be when you have children, which is in not too distant future, but what type of kingdom do you want your children to grow up in?
Yes.
And I think this is very important. I think it's, a lot of the changes, it was inevitable that we were going to see this sort of very rapid change because of the demographics of Saudi Arabia. You've got a predominantly young population that is increasingly well educated, travel, online 24/7, engaged with the world in ways that they certainly weren't when I first came here because there was no social media.
Yes.
In those days. And so I think a lot of this was inevitable that you were going to see this happening. But as I say, I think it's very having the discussions about the social changes and having discussions about the direction of the kingdom, I think is very important. And I think young people should have those discussions because it's a way of deciding how you want things to be. It's about your priorities, about what's important for you as a as a country, as I say, or as your society, your community, your family.
As you mentioned, it's all about adapting. How did you see from researcher point of view the adaptation in the different regions in Saudi Arabia as you are?
Well, I mean, obviously there's you see big differences, and a lot of that, of course, is to do with urbanization, because obviously we've seen the cities, Jeddah, Riyadh, and the sort of Dammam, Khobar, Dharan conurbation in the Eastern Province. We've seen the populations swell to huge populations that live in these places now. What's it, approximately 8 million people here, and Dammam, Khobar, Dharan, and it's all one place now. It used to be separate, but it's all one place now. So obviously, that's had a big impact. And then when going back to, we talked about Qasim, when you go out to sort of the regions, you do see differences, because the populations are not as large as they are here, not as not as globalized, if you like. And this is this whole process of urbanization has had a huge, profound impact on the kingdom.
Yeah, absolutely. You, mashallah, spend a lot of time in Saudi Arabia, and you must speak some Arabic. Yes, Doctor? Yeah. Let's try to now it's my I want to
ولكن أتكلم الفصحى فقط.
Oh, okay. Nice.
الفصحى فقط.
Okay, I want to take advantage of this interview, so we will shift the positions. You were the teacher and I were the student. Let's be the student and you are the teacher. The opposite. I am the teacher, you are the student. And if you can, it's like a test. If you can give us or just speak in Arabic, al-Fusha, accident or something, or just tell us something about small story or something in Arabic.
Okay. Well, okay. So درست اللغة العربية في الحقيقة في مصر. نعم. في المعهد ILI، معهد مشهور في منطقة مهندسين القاهرة. نعم. ولكن درست هناك منذ 15 سنة. نعم. وبعد ذلك درست في جامعتي في بريطانيا في معهد دراسات اللغة العربية في جامعة إكستر. نعم. وأيضا درست مع مدرسة في القاهرة، أيضا في أونلاين في كمبيوتر. والآن لي مدرسة في الأردن في معهد جوردن لانجويج أكاديمي. نعم. وأدرس الفصحى مرة أخرى، وأيضا أدرس ميديا عربيك أيضا معها. نعم. أفهم الألمانية. نعم. تمام. أفهم الألمانية، ولكن مفيد لي أن أدرس الفصحى أو modern standard Arabic. هذا مفيد لي جدا. نعم. ولكن في الحقيقة مثلا عندما عملت في جامعة الملك فهد. نعم. من الصعب أن أتكلم اللغة العربية في جامعة معهد فهد الملك فهد، بسبب لأن اللغة الرسمية في هذه الجامعة اللغة الإنجليزية. وعندما كنت أستاذ هناك دائما كلمت اللغة الإنجليزية مع طلابي دائما كل يوم في صف في مكتبي.
Before we end, I think we want to stay more with you and we want to ask you more and more. But as you said, you have a gym class, so
that's correct.
Yeah, you are so you like the gym so much. Is there some things you want to share about the gym and how do you feel about gym?
Well, I think that being physically fit is incredibly important, not just for your physical health, but also for your mental health. Absolutely. It does make a huge difference. I didn't start going to the gym seriously until about 15 years ago, I suppose it was, when I first started seriously going to the gym, and I know it's really made a difference to my life. It's not about it becoming routine. It's actually about it becoming part of your life. And it is part of my life. I go 5-6 times a week. I have a personal trainer. I train very hard with him. I mean, I've got one here in Riyadh. I used to have one in Kobar, but I find that it helps my productivity. It helps my general well-being. It's a good way to de-stress. And I think, coronavirus has underscored the importance of keeping physically fit. And we know that the virus attacks people who are overweight and who are, not physically fit. So I think this is sort of a bit of a wake-up call,
yes.
To all of us. And I think when I'm, in my job where I'm using the computer so much, and I'm sitting at this desk and I'm writing, and I'm fairly sort of sedentary and I'm not moving around that much, I think it's it is very important, and I can't stress that enough. And I think it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's you go walking, whether you go climbing, whether you swim, whether you ride a bike, or it doesn't matter what you do. I mean, just for me, it's gym. I enjoy it, and that's one of the reasons. But I think it's very important to sort of have some sort of physical activity, because it does. It really helps your mental health as well. There's no doubt about it. And all doctors say that. I mean, I think the best interview I ever saw with the doctor was when somebody was asking him about, do you think there'll be sort of miracle cures in the future for aging, or miracle cures for this and everything? And he said, there is a miracle cure. It's called exercise. So, I see people at the gym, have done over the years, who, they're in their 80s and they're still working out. I know somebody a friend of my family who I speak to fairly frequently, and she's 95 and she still does water aerobics.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and the thing is, it's if you continue doing it in your life, there's no, you can continue doing it till you're a great age.
Yeah, I think.
And it is I think it is. I think especially in our sort of, when we're all on computers and we're all, I think sometimes we sort of forget that we need that, not just for our physical well-being, but very importantly for our mental well-being.
I think especially in our society, because we have cars.
Yes.
Always you will be sitting down and so on.
Yes.
And as you mentioned, I think it should be a lifestyle, and part of your life is not just like a homework, you have to do it or something. It should be part of your life.
Yes, because you do benefit from it. There's no doubt about it. We all benefit from it.
Before we finish, Doctor, thank you so much for your time.
You're most welcome.
The last question, I think, if you have an advice you want to give it to our audience, mashallah, you have very long journey, and you try a lot and work a lot of areas with different people. You meet a lot of different people, and very deep connection with people, doing research, and a lot of changing a lot of places. What can you, if I told you, give us an advice in one sentence, what it will be?
Don't put yourself in a box. Everybody else will try and put you in a box, so don't put yourself in one. Always be open to opportunities. Always be open to change. Always be open to adapt. Always be open to be flexible, and to profit from your experiences. And yes, don't be closed. Don't be closed. Because opportunities come that you never would ever anticipate. But if you're closed, you can't profit from them.
And always there is time. I mean, you did your graduate study later in your life, not
yes,
not
but I mean, it's a cliche, I know, but life is a journey, and just because, I have always said this to lots of students, there's no rule that says that you have to do your BA, then your MA, then your PhD all in a row. No, not at all. Education never stops. You can go to university or college or do courses or whatever you want to do at any point in your life. And in fact, there are stages. Everybody has stages in their life, and some things suit you more when you're in your 20s than in your 50s or something. Would I have wanted to have done a PhD in my 20s? No, because that wasn't my life then. And so I think you have to be sort of open to things. And I think sometimes your mind tells you as well sometimes when it's ready for a change, or it's ready for a challenge, or it's ready for something. And you should always be open to that. If you want to go and do a PhD at 90, go and do it.
Yes.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
Why not?
I think you have to write a book in this specific journey.
Maybe we'll see.
Your last book was amazing. It's Being Young Saudi, and it was. I think maybe we will have another interview or something talking about that specific.
Yes,
book.
because there's a lot of.
It is your last book or before last book?
No, my last book, because that only came out, Being Young Male in Saudi.
I think this is
Being Young Male in Saudi, Identity and Politics in a Globalized Kingdom, which came out exactly a year ago.
Yes.
Exactly a year ago.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mark.
Thank you.
I think I didn't feel enough talking to you, but alhamdulillah, we cover everything. We think it's important to highlight it.
Thank you for the
thank you so much. You are most welcome, and I think we get pleasured meeting you.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity.
Any last word you want to say?
I would just say if anybody would like to contact me about anything, then please feel free.
Yes.
And please provide my email address.
Absolutely.
mthompson@kfchris.com. Or alternatively, you can contact me via my Twitter account.
I will just type it down. We will type it down.
But if anybody has any comments, questions, or anything of interest, then I'm always open to meet new friends, colleagues, and what have you. And please don't hesitate.
Thank you so much again. Until to see you again.
Inshallah.
مع السلامة.
مع السلامة.
شكرا لك وشكرا لك عزيزتي وعزيزي المستمع. في الخاتمة بدي أغير لغة الحديث، بدل ما أقول أعزائي المستمعين وأصدقائنا المستمعين أبى أخاطبكم بلغة الفرد، لأنه بالفعل ما وصل لهاللحظة واستمع كامل الحلقة إلا شخص مهتم وحريص على دعم البودكاست، وقبلها حريص على إفادة ذاته. نتمنى أن الحلقة كانت جيدة، نتمنى أنها بالفعل أضافت لكم، ونتمنى إنك وإنك تشاركيها مع الناس اللي تشوفوهم مهتمين، وكذلك أنكم تقيمونا في المنصات المختلفة. هذه الحلقة زي ما تعرفوا حلقة مختلفة، هي أول حلقة احنا نصورها، وطبيعة الحال ما قد صورنا حلقة قبل كده، فكان خلف هذا الجهد فريق ساعد وساهم، ونحب نشكرهم واحد واحد. أولهم المخرج باسم مصباح على جهده في التصوير، وكذلك الصديق أحمد الظاهر على الدعم المعنوي، هو كان معايا موجود وقت تصوير الحلقة في مكتب الدكتور. وأكيد فريقنا الرائع رئيسنا الكبير سعيد بمعروف ومحمد زيتون وعمر. وهذه آخر حلقة في الموسم الثالث، وحنتوقف بعدها، ونعتذر منكما إن حنوقف بعد هالحلقة فترة من الزمن، نرتب أمورنا، نطور، نعمل بعض الاستراتيجيات، علنا إن شاء الله في الموسم الرابع نخرج بنتائج أفضل. وبهالمناسبة نتمنى منكم إنكم تصبروا علينا، في نفس الوقت شاركونا وفكروا معنا إيش الأشياء اللي ممكن نضيفها، كيف ممكن نطور، كيف ممكن نثري تجربة توثيق السير للناس المتخصصة والأكاديميين عندنا. ومؤمنين كثير إنه في جامعاتنا وبيننا الكثير من السير التي تستحق أن تتوثق سواء صوتيا أو بطريقة أخرى، فنتمنى أنكم تشاركونا بالأسماء أو بالأفكار اللي تشوفوها إنها مناسبة، لعلنا نرتقي ويكون عندنا توثيق حقيقي لجميع السير اللي ممكن نوثقها. وبهالخصوص زي ما تعرفوا عندنا في مكتبة شمعة أكثر من 20 سيرة، نتمنى منك ومنك إنكم تستمعوا لها وتشاركوها مع الناس، علها تستفيد، وعلنا نبقي لهذول الناس العظماء اللي أضافوا للمجتمع وأضافوا للعلوم والتخصصات اللي هم فيها الكثير، إننا على الأقل نقدرهم بمعرفة سيرهم والاستفادة منها، وأن يبقى لهم أثر إن شاء الله. نلقاكم على خير إن شاء الله في الموسم الرابع إن الله كتب لنا عمر، وشكرا جزيلا، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.